Hi, welcome to Maverick Mindcast. My guest today is Michael Feeley. He's a former UK police officer, now an esoteric author, and soon to be presenter of his own TV show called Michael Feeley's Hidden Knowledge. He's also featured in a full length movie with the likes of Eric von Daniken, hopefully I said that right, called Divine Intervention. That's a great film. You should check it out. Michael answers the questions no scholar or Egyptologist has, and he has pieced together a blueprint of the ancient world of Earth and beyond, proving that our ancestors had the same message to tell us. What Michael is going to say rewrites history. Do you want to hear the message of the knowledge keepers of the past? Then stay tuned. I definitely think you do. Michael, thanks for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
I have to say, I'm so intrigued by your background. So, if you could just tell us more how you went from being a police officer to studying the esoteric, I think the audience would find that really interesting.
Yes, well, again, when it took me a long, long time, from teenage years, I always wanted to do that particular occupation, and it took me a long time to actually achieve that ambition. But when I did, it was a 30-year career that I signed up for, and I always stated it was my first marriage, and nobody actually goes into a marriage with the intention of getting a divorce. Sometimes things happen
Of
that
course.
change the path of history really and the future. So 17 years into a 30-year career, a lot of strange and paranormal things began to happen.
Hmm.
And there was one particular traumatic case where I actually consciously went back in time to Victorian England, and I witnessed or certainly relived the last moments of a teenage girl's life. Now, there's a big story to this in terms of many years of build up and many years of her wanting to look into her death and different things. But nevertheless, I went back consciously in time. And that was a traumatic 6 to 7 months for me where I couldn't even switch the light off at night in bed because it was the fear of that I was going to go back there and it was going to happen again. So it was a real traumatic time, but at the same time as well, I was also seeing endless crafts of varying sizes in the sky. I was seeing dimensional portals opening up in the sky and seeing these craft actually come through dimensional gateways. And all of this thing combined, literally in the spaces of days, weeks, months, all together amplified, completely turned my life upside down to such an extent. It's like you don't know where you are, you don't know what's going on, but you know that there's something significant that's happened to you. And as a result of this, again, it's a longer story than what I'm transmitting now, but all of this combined really just made me think that there's another way, there's another reality, there's other things going on in life than this. And when you have witnessed and saw and heard and smelt everything that I did in such a limited time, you can never go back to what you believe to be normal. So you are a changed person. So the person that started the journey is not the one that is now presented when you look into the mirror. I could not go back to my former self, to my former life, and I had to just continue wherever the wind took me. And where the wind took me was lots and lots of paranormal incidents. But then I began to find the answers to what had happened to me scientifically and spiritually. And then it began to progress and progress and progress to getting downloads of information, to getting ancient secrets that were timed in a time capsule of knowledge to re-emerge at a certain time in future history. And that future time is now. And I was beginning to get lots and lots of downloads of this secret information where I'd have a question and an answer come to me in the same moment. So it was sort of a real weird science in terms of all the things that happened. But it gave me lots and lots of answers, and it gave me the opportunity to piece together a complete ancient blueprint from Earth and beyond Earth, because there's mathematical coordination between the monuments on Earth, between themselves, and also between the monuments on Mars, the monuments on the Moon, monuments on Venus. And I began to realize that there's a real ancient blueprint here where everyone is telling us the same thing, but in different ways. So when you start seeing the same numbers, the same symbols, the same codes appearing throughout the ancient world into the modern day, into secret societies of today, into government logos, into certain hand gestures that government officials and pop stars and different things do, then you realize that there's a message. And when you realize there's a message, which is the first part of anything, is to realize that something exists. Once you realize there was a message, I then began to follow its trail to find out what that message was. And that's really why I went from a career which was going to be 30 years, which ended at year 17, and now my life is completely upside down, and I'm answering many questions that have been asked by humanity for many thousands of years.
And was it easy to make that decision? I mean, that's a pretty secure role
It
you're
is.
in.
The ironic thing is the time that this was happening was a time when we were going into a global recession, and people were being repossessed from their house. People were losing their jobs. Now, I had a secure occupation. Unless you do anything, unless you break the law or do anything really, really criminal, you have a secure profession. So at the time when everybody was losing their jobs and a lot of people were losing their home, I walked out of a secure job. So of course you can imagine that the kind of looks and the kind of opinions that you would get. But I kind of think that the decision made itself. And when you look at, that there's this great argument in psychology between free will and determinism. One of the great arguments of psychology. Many people say that we have free will, but I would argue that we only have a very, very limited free will. We exist within a determinism, within a determined outcome. So if you imagine how many people now who are listening and watching have prayed, they've tried to persuade, they've pleaded, they've begged for a certain outcome, but they don't get the outcome they want, they get the outcome that is just the outcome. So that for me tells you that there's some underlying force that is making things happen, but it's making it happen how it wishes the outcome to be. And that's really what happened with me. Everything seemed to be predestined, that at that particular time in my life, these things had to happen. And it was such a traumatic event that there's no way I could have slept through the alarm clock. It was a case of it was going to get my attention, it was going to change my life. And that's exactly what it did. So it really, the decision shouldn't have been easy. It should have been a very, very hard decision. And as I say, because it was my first marriage, I was literally there all the time. I never used to have any leave, I never used to have any holidays, never had any time off because I was focused and I wanted to be there. And to go from that to handing in your resignation with no emotion whatsoever is really perplexing, because people used to joke that, if you used to cut my vein, the police would come out of it not good. I was that closely tied to this occupation. So it should have been a difficult decision, but it was an extremely easy decision because I think that the decision was already made.
Oh, that's wonderful. Mike, because I don't think it's working too well right now. It's back. I'm getting feedback. So would you say that your work is predicated on mysteries or secrets of the ancient world? Because I love studying this stuff myself. I'm not an expert, just very superficially, but it seems like these are not totally mysteries. They're mysteries to some of us, but they've been known for a long time and just hidden. So I'm curious to get your opinion on that.
Well, they're only mysteries because we don't understand the language in which they're in. Now, if you understand codes, if you understand symbols, then these things are not mysteries. But it's like if I go to Japan or China and someone's speaking Japanese or Chinese, then to me what they're saying is a mystery because I don't understand that language. And it's the same in terms of the ancient world. The ancient world really was a way to deliver hidden truth through the medium of symbolic language. So it's only mysterious to those who don't understand it. So when you look at the likes of the Bible, which is really the whole Bible is a remake of Giza Plateau in Egypt. So everything that you find in the modern day Bible is in Egypt. It's written within the pyramids. So, like Moses, when the Bible tells us that Moses was born in Egypt. When you look at the true Egyptian word for Egypt, it's Kehemet. So Kehemet is K-E-M-E-T. The K is knowledge, and the Emet with a capital M is truth and wisdom. Now the capital M is Mem, which is water. So Moses is drawn from the water. So within the word Kemet, you have Moses. So Moses was born in Egypt, within the word Egypt. So all of these different symbols, you have to have an eye to see these ancient symbols, and you will find that the pyramids, I know who built them, I know how they built them. Egyptologists don't, scholars don't. Even some of the most famous scholars in the world who have looked into Egypt all their life do not know how the pyramids were built and who built them, and I do. And when you look at the Bible, I've found that all of the stories and all of the characters are metaphorical in order to hide this hidden truth. And it's only when you learn to look at a certain depth that you will find it. If you imagine that there's a submarine, traveling from the UK to America, and you have a Russian ship on the surface, and they're dropping depth charges to try and get the submarine. Unless you get the correct depth, you're not going to get anywhere near the submarine. And it's really the same in terms of hidden knowledge. When you read the Bible and you read it like a book from Genesis to Revelation, which is really the genitals to illumination. But unless you get the correct depth, you're not going to get anywhere near that submarine, which is ancient knowledge. So when I've looked at all of these different ancient cultures as a separate culture, I found that really they are the same knowledge base that once ruled, once reigned the earth. And the fingerprint has been left for us to realize that in days gone by, it was knowledge, it was wisdom that ruled the world. That is your pyramids, that is your Stonehenge, all the pyramids around the world, those on the surface, those that they found underneath the sea. There's pyramids on Venus, there's pyramids on Mars, there's pyramids on the moon, there's Egyptian obelisks on the moon, etc., etc. So this knowledge base of people who were known as the sons of God, and they were the ones with elongated skulls. That is where you find elongated skulls in graves in Peru, in Malta, in Stonehenge, in Egypt. All of these different places have the sons of God who were the rulers by wisdom, by knowledge. They were taken over by the sons of men, who are those who ruled with the lust for monetary gain and for power. And that is why we now have the governments and the systems that we have, which is basically running the planet for profit, because it is the sons of men who overtook the sons of God, and now we are still lumbered with this corrupt system of money and power and competition and everything else. And so that's how the ancient past comes to the modern day with our governments and with our rulership. They are running a planet for profit to make money for the benefit of themselves and not the benefit of all. So the ancients, or when you look into the ancient knowledge and how we can regain that knowledge, we are told how to do that within these monuments.
Okay. And so with that said, would you say that we're regressing or evolving as a society, humanity? I mean, and it's interesting, you mentioned the Egyptians, and I'm thinking, I remember, weren't the pharaohs actually buried with like all their treasures? And, it seems kind of odd to me that you do that. I mean, you can't take it with you, but I guess they were going to reincarnate, or that.
Well, it depends on your belief system. You see, gold is the cover of illumination. So when you look at alchemy, alchemical gold, philosopher's stone. So gold was the skin of the gods. So gold really is illumination. It's the energy of the sun, etc., etc. Now, when you see the likes of a mummy, it's basically an image of matter. Matter, obviously, the physical world, is the law of matter is character we know as Satan, whereas the law of spirit is character we know as God, because they are complementary halves of each other. We have one matter, one spirit. So when we come from a celestial place to a terrestrial place, which is here, which is known as the fall, because we've relinquished that for this. So anyone that comes from spirit to matter has fallen, and we have to spend our lives, many of us spend our lives trying to return to that law of spirit. So if you imagine the nativity play that we did just a couple of months ago, a virgin in mystical terms is a soul that has been purified, got rid of all the earthly dross, and is able to take on the divine child, the divine seed. That divine child is divine consciousness, God's state. That child is born in a stable. Now, what they mean by stable is a place of animals, because the majority of humanity are in human form, but they are of animalistic nature. So we are born, the divine child is born into a stable. Now,
wait, can you just clarify what you mean by animalistic nature? Because I feel like animals have it figured out way better than we do, because they kind of work with nature, not against nature.
They do. When you look at many humans and the way in which humans act and the way they are, that they are a howling mob, they are undeveloped, for want of a better word. That is what the majority of humanity is. So it is a human form, but it's an animalistic nature. So when you see the likes of the Minotaur and the Centaur, and you have a half man and the rest is a horse, it's telling you that you must overcome your animalistic nature to become the divine, civilized human being. So you start off as a savage, and through working in the stable, which is the place of savagery, which is the place of animals, this divine child is born. Now that is the story of the nativity play, as the Bible tells you, but that is telling you that the divine child, the divine spirit, falls into matter, and it is up to you to return back to that divinity, to experience the divine, the divine condition, and not the animalistic condition that we currently live in. Now they use the energies of the zodiac in which to help them do this. When the sun is in the sign of the goat, which is Capricorn, those are the energies that they use most in which to raise their divine child. That is why we have Christmas in December, because that is the sign of the goat, Capricorn. So the goat is really a symbol of the divine child. And that is why we call children kids. We call children youngsters, because they are young stars. The carbon and the oxygen that we are now dressed in came from an exploding star in the Orion constellation. So we are young stars, we are youngsters. So we have fallen from grace really to experience also that the Creator can experience itself. Now, when the Creator recognizes itself within matter, within physical creation, it manifests as a triangle, which is the original Trinity. The recognizer, the recognized, and the recognition. So when you look at the Egyptian pyramids, etc., they are the triangle. Now, when this creative force steps out of the dimensionless state beyond space and time to manifest into the third dimension, it also is the number 4. So if you have the triangle and the number 4, it equals 7, and 7 is the mystical key to the third dimensional world. Now, there's lots and lots of symbols that are hidden in everyday card games, dice games, and I'll demonstrate in a moment what I mean. But when you look at the likes of the tarot deck, which later became the playing cards that we use today, they tell you more about the past than they do the future. Now, the tarot cards were a system that the Knights Templar had in order to hide secrets from the Church of Rome. So when you look at the likes of the Fool in the tarot cards, when you look at the likes of the Joker in the playing cards, that talks about the new initiate on his journey to initiation, to enlightenment. And when you look at the dice, game of dice, each opposite number will always equal 7. So you have 6, opposite is 1. You have 5, opposite is 2. You have 4, opposite is 3. It will always be the number 7. So number 7 in dice is the unmanifest factor, because there's only 6 places. Now, when you use cipher, which is a mystical coded language where you replace certain letters with other letters or numbers or symbols, and you look at the words written as number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6, it equals 103. So if we have 2 dice, that is 206. There are 206 bones in the human body. It is the human temple. Eden, known as paradise, is a paradise. We are Eden. We are the Garden of Eden. And much of creation has a simultaneous existence. When unity separates, you have duality. You have one that is manifest, and you have one simultaneously existing that is unmanifest. So when I get that now, that is unmanifest, now it is manifest. Now it is unmanifest, now it is manifest, and so on and so on. So you can see one of them, but not the other. That is how creation works. So that gives you what the pyramids really are, which is using matter to manifest divinity on earth in the third dimension. And it was the sons of God with the elongated skulls. The elongated skulls tell you that they had a fully developed brain center and had spiritual capability beyond what we know now. Those are the elongated skulls, and you'll find those skulls throughout the world at sacred sites because they built them.
That's fascinating. And when you say like we come to Earth and we're matter, we kind of need to get back to the ether. I don't know. I feel like, we are in this cycle, and this is why this is what I found the most intriguing thing, this endless loop. But I also think of animals, and when you domesticate an animal, I feel an animal manifests its true destiny, its true divinity through being free, not being domesticated or broken or whatever you want to call it, held in captivity. And I kind of feel like we are in that similar situation. Like when I'm walking my dog on a leash, I sometimes think, am I this person too? Like, I'm walking her on a leash, but I kind of feel like I'm on a leash sometimes too. It's this like, kind of like, oh, you're free, but you're not really free, because you're stuck in this cycle of just mundane, everyday obligations that people will put aside their spiritual well-being, their physical well-being, their familial well-being, when you talk to them, but now I have to do this. It's like, it's interesting how we are programmed to indoctrinate our thought process into serving someone else before serving ourselves, meaning like who we really are, or our family or extensions of ourselves. So I don't know. Can you talk about that a little? Like that endless, I feel like that's related to that endless loop that kind of keeps us away from getting back to the spirit. And how can we get there?
It does. I mean, when you look into the sons of men that they are called, who are identified purely with the body, it is a materialistic existence, it is a sacred book, it is monetary, it is power, it is rulership over other people. If you imagine if you are a control freak, then you need someone to control. Now, when you set up daily struggles and people finding it difficult to eat and afford food and afford heating bills and things like that, you are casting them further and further and further into matter so that they completely lose sight who they are. If you imagine that you're on a ship and you just leave the shore, at some point when you turn around, the shore is no longer there, but you've gone that far through the ocean that you forgot there is a shore. And that really is where we're at, because we've forgotten who we are and what we are and our divine potential. So we literally, a lot of humanity are going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the well, so they can't even see the surface anymore. And that becomes their absolute reality. There's no other reality. It is just make money, make money, make money. Let's step on other people as we're on the way up the ladder to this competition to have the best company. To £5 billion profit this year is not enough. It must be 10 billion next year. And they're completely lost sight of what is meant to be, what is meant to have happened. What I think has happened has been a divine blueprint. Now, when you look at what divinity is, when you look at what this character God really is, it is nothing, but it is also everything. So as I said moments ago, you have to have two complementary halves in order to have perception, in order to have knowledge, in order to have a three-dimensional world. You have to have two complementary halves. So when this unity separates, it separates into duality. So nothing and everything is a simultaneous existence. But for nothing to be everything, then you have to experience everything to become nothing again. And we are all fragmented pieces of the original creative energy in order to recognize itself and feed itself back to itself. And that is why what we all are and what we're all doing here now. So we are basically divine fragments of the original creative force. Now, when you look at the laws of nature, which animals, which trees, which humans are subject to those laws, it is cyclic in nature. You have the autumn, you have the winter, you have the spring, you have the summer, and that just repeats and repeats and repeats. The trunk of the tree is always the same, but the leaves disappear and they come back. So that is really a reincarnation in front of our eyes. So because we are also a part of the same laws of nature, humans also reincarnate. Not the body that we're in now. You know, the self will always be the same, but the leaves will be different. And the whole of nature is a cyclic reality. It's been set in motion, so it requires very, very little intervention. But unless you understand the laws of nature, you can never conquer them. If you understand the laws of nature within you and you master yourself, mastering within also masters without. So if you imagine a circle just going round and round and round and round, how can you break a cycle? By adding a straight line. Now, what I mean by a straight line is light is seen as truth. And light, unless there's some other force that bends it or whatever, light naturally travels the path of least resistance in a straight line. So from point A to point B. So when someone says to you, you can never get a straight answer, that is what they're referring to, because light travels in a straight line. So if you put a straight line of truth in an endless circle, it breaks the circle. When you introduce truth and knowledge into your life, you begin to understand. When you look at the symbol of the mysteries, which is the pentagram, which is the Star of Bethlehem, which is what we put on the tree every year, you know, when you look at symbol of the mysteries is the pentagram, because the whole of creation is the number 10. So number 5, man being a miniature of the universe, is completed man, the pentagram, the 4 elements, and the 5th, the ether, the 5th element. When you look at the most famous religious hymn in the world, Hallelujah, the chorus of Hallelujah is the pentagram. It is encoded within the chorus of Hallelujah is the pentagram, the symbol of the mysteries. The 4 elements, your fire, your earth, your water, your air, our creation, are within you. If you master those elements, you master yourself. If you are always angry and you're always hateful, your fire element is out of balance. If you are always crying and always emotional, your water element is out of balance. If you cannot control your thoughts, your air element is out of balance. And if you don't look after your body, your earth element is out of balance. If you master all of those elements, you become what is known as the God man, which is connected to the divine mind. So if you wish to get out of this nature cycle, you have to master yourself, because you are nature, you are part of that cycle. And unless you master yourself, you cannot master what is outside of you. The face reflects what is going on inside. So when you see a face on Sphinx of Egypt, that is really inner transformation that is expressed as an outer countenance, which is a face. That is the face of the Sphinx. The Sphinx is a symbol of the sons of God, the lion, and it's telling you that the mystery of the Sphinx is really the puzzle of self, because it represents the sons of God, and everybody has the potential, the divine potential, to replicate what they're doing. These massive, beautiful monuments are testimony to the knowledge and the wisdom of the greater good that once reigned the earth.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say, back to that question about whether we've evolved or regressed, if you look at the pyramids or Stonehenge or anything like that, I personally don't feel that we were really on a path of evolution. We're kind of regressing back. And, you know, how have those amazing structures, how were they built? I mean, I think about, and we don't really ask questions. That's the other thing that, you know, like you were talking about the symbology of the Christmas tree and the, you know, I'm I'm Christian, and I always have to have my Christmas tree, and I put my star. Well, now I have a bow, but it used to be a star at the top. And, we just kind of, well, we've always done it that way. So why question it? But it is
Mm.
interesting that we truly don't take a step back and ask why things are the way they are, or how certain traditions are just accepted, certain symbols are accepted. What is the car? Like, the serpent, just looking at how prevalent that is. Why is there a cross with two, snakes? That's kind of not a great image for health and medicine. And what Alfa Romeo is it, where they actually have the serpent eating the human being? It's interesting. Or you look at, what is it, the Masons, or where is it with the wolf in sheep's clothing, where it clearly shows the wolf? you know, I look at that and be like, "Ooh, I don't know if I like that. That doesn't look very appetizing, being a human myself." But we just seem to, no, well, that's just, that's the symbol. That's what we've always done. Or even, and I was raised Catholic, even Jesus on a cross is kind of a really startling, especially, I went to Catholic school as a child, and now that I'm thinking about it, there was no trauma behind that. I never looked at that and said, oh, I just accepted it. We had a crown of thorns on his head, and, you know,
What we do, the thing is that to our detriment, we just do things because of the cycle. People tell us this is the truth. Our parents say, you are now a Catholic, you are now a Christian, you are now a Muslim. This is what you believe. This is how it is. And people never get beyond that stage. And people never look at what it means. So when you look at the story of Adam and Eve, it's not talking about individual people. It's talking about the fall of man, because Adam is Aleph Dam, which means the blood of the ox, which is sacrifice. And it goes back to the sacrifice that I was speaking about the womb. When you come into this third dimensional world, you have sacrificed yourself to be here. When you look at the altar of a church, altar means place of sacrifice, but it also relates to the womb, because when you are in the womb, you are sacrificing yourself. You've fallen from there to here. The serpent has always been a symbol of wisdom. And when you look at the Kundalini energy of Eastern mythology, it's really the cold serpent that activates the Christ within you. Because the actual Christ character, again, is a metaphor. It was never an individual person. Neither was Moses, neither was Noah, neither were all of these characters. But what they are telling us is the illumination potential within us. And a lot of the things in the story of Christ are, should we say, anatomical things. And when you look at certain things that have happened, they relate to things that are anatomically in Gray's Anatomy, which is the Bible of doctors. So all of these things really are metaphors. So when you look at Christ on the cross is man, because when you put your arms straight out and you're straight bodied, you are the cross. Now, the part of the cross from the neck to the top of the head is the fourth way, which is basically the connection between the body and the cosmos. So when you look at the Father is really knowledge. Our Father is the knowledge of our mind. Now, the universal knowledge is the Heavenly Father. So our Father, who art in heaven, is telling us that all knowledge starts there, but it comes down. So our Father, who art in heaven, and then he goes on to say, earth as it is in heaven. You are bringing the divine knowledge, the divine wisdom, divine consciousness, the divine child down to earth. And when you have this divine knowledge, you are creating heaven on earth. Now, when you look at all of the initiates of the past and even now, but not so much now, but certainly in the past, an initiation is really to expand the body's capability and the body's resistance to higher spiritual frequency. Mm-hmm. So when you have the likes of the Ark of the Covenant, that was a device that they used in the likes of Egypt to transmute these higher spiritual energies into the human body. Now, the only way that you could successfully live through that was by working on your body and expanding your nerve endings and expanding your capability to take in these extra knowledges. So the Ark of the Covenant is the sarcophagus of the Great Pyramid, where candidates would go in there, top would be over, and they would beam in all of these higher frequencies that you can only withstand if you spent many, many years preparing for it. Now, if anybody who's never done any exercise always sits on the couch and never does anything, but to immediately run a marathon, it probably wouldn't do them much good. But if they were out every morning training and practicing for that marathon, they'd be able to complete it easily. And it's all about preparation. So you have the serpent, which is your wisdom. You have the Adam and Eve, which is telling us a fall. And you have all of these different characters like Christ and different ones that are telling us of human potential. So for argument's sake, as I talk about Genesis, which is the genitals, which is where this sacred energy of the serpent starts, and it concludes in the promised land, which is the illumination of the mind. So Genesis to Revelation is the genitals to the promised land, the higher mind, the divine consciousness, which is really the seventh sphere of existence. Now the initiates, the pharaohs, the high priests of Egypt, etc., were constantly living in the seventh sphere of existence, which is the God state. That is why when you have the 7 days of creation, the day is Yom in Hebrew, which is a period of light. It is the God day. There are 7 of them, because 7, as I said, is the key to the third dimension. 7 chakras, 7th heaven, all of these different things related to number 7. So you have these God people walking around because they're always on 7th plane of existence. So going from Genesis, which is the lower level, which is where this serpent cold energy is at the base of the spine, through certain rituals, through the activation of certain aisles within us, like the spinal column, spinal fluid, that gets risen with the spiritual awakening. The serpent pushes that up Jacob's ladder, which is the spine. The spine has 33 vertebrae. That is Jacob's ladder. That is why there's 33 degrees of masonry. Jesus died age 33 on the cross, etc., etc. That is Atlantis. Atlantis, the 33rd vertebrae known as Atlas, which is the island of Atlantis, which is the mind. So when you have this sacred serpent energy being pushed up by the aisle of the body, the spinal fluid, aisle means anointed. So the anointed one is pushing this serpent energy through the solar plexus, which is the energy of the sun, into the mind, Golgotha, the place of skulls. Now, there's a part of the brain called the pineal gland, but next to the pineal gland, there's a gap. Now, you can confirm this in Gray's medical dictionary. There's a gap by the pineal gland, which is known as the vault. When you look at the definition of vault, it means tomb, it means grave. That is the tomb of Christ, the Christ aisle. So when you get activated, then that Christ aisle is Easter and the resurrection of your Christ inside Golgotha, inside your head. Now there's only one energy that can go through the 2 pillars of Hercules, which are the 2 anterior pillars of the brain. And that is an energy called For Amen, F-O-R-A-M-E-N. You may recognize the word Amen in that. For Amen, forever and ever, Amen. It is the energy of the Christ, the aisle, the anointed one, that activates the illumination of the mind. That is Christ. Every single one of us has Christ within us because it's the illumination of our own God state. But they've used it as a story. So when you look at the sons of God, the Bible, which comes from Egypt via Hebrew hands, Jesus is the Son of God, because what it is telling you is that we all have the potential to operate on the 7th plane, the divine knowledge, the divine way. But we have to do certain things. So the way in which we are living now is not the way in which it was purposed. It has been hijacked.
Oh, goodness.
It has been hijacked. And when you realize these things, then this divine child, this divine seed that is born in the stable can still manifest its God state, even though it is amongst the animalistic nature of humanity. Every single person can activate their God self. Self never changes. When you look at the word self, It contains two letters, EL, which is God. The self never changes. So we need to realize the self, activate the self, and have knowledge of the self. When science looks at the mystery of the universe, when it looks at the mystery of nature, when it looks at the mystery of the oceans, the answer to the mystery is within the mystery itself. We are the universe, we are the oceans, we are nature. So unless we understand ourselves, we will not understand everything else, because everything is within us. We are the universe. I am matter with a human consciousness. An animal is matter with an animal consciousness. A tree is matter with the consciousness of a tree. But when you realize what you are and what your purpose is, which is not what has happened, we need to eradicate that and get back to where we should be, on the correct timeline, with the correct knowledge, with the correct perception, because everything that we see is not necessarily true, but we perceive it to be true, which is a construct of the brain. You know, look through the one eye, not the two, and then you will see a greater reality.
But do we have to come to a certain consensus? It's kind of feeling that way, because there's a lot of people who see truth and want to break this cycle, especially the past 2 years that we've been in this cycle of, I don't know, hypnosis, I would say. But it feels like it's not enough, you know, just if, and I'm not saying I've evolved to that extent of what you're talking about quite yet, but just to see a lot more truth than of just the reality of our whole existence. Doesn't seem like it's enough to break that, you know, to create that straight line, to break that loop. Seems like we have to come to a much larger consensus before that can happen. And I believe it's slowly but surely happening, but what's your take on that? Like, it's not enough just for you. It has to happen on a larger scale.
Yeah.
Or?
Well, my take on that is the Earth really is, you say, a high school in which to evolve. And the same with any high school, you always have, you know, you go there for the first year, then that comes second year and third year and fourth year, till eventually you graduate. But at the time of your graduation, there's somebody else just starting year 1, year 2, year 3. And it's almost against that cyclic nature of evolution. What I see happening, and this is spoken about in ancient texts as well, within the Great Pyramid, what is happening is at the end of the 6th civilization, which is pretty much now, there will be a reintroduction of ancient knowledge. It was timed and it started in 2001, which is the 17th 360-year cycle of what is now the Hebrew calendar, but was originally Egyptian star codes. That also dates with the Great Pyramid as well, but nevertheless, it talks about this 6th civilization, and it talks about a 7th civilization, which the Bible talks about, or certainly within the Jehovah's Witness religion, they would deem that as Armageddon and the 1,000-year rule of Christ before Satan is allowed back in. But really, the 7th civilization are the flame bearers of humanity. The flame is the illumination, is the fire, purification. It is your Vulcan, it is your Mr. Spock of Star Trek, Shin, because he was a Vulcan, who is the god of volcanoes, and that is the Hebrew symbol for Shin, which is the illumination, which is the fire. So this 7th civilization, you can see that in your Olympic flame, again, your Statue of Liberty, your torch. It's the flame bearers of knowledge of Earth. That is the 7th civilization. So what I'm seeing is realities within realities, and it is a known fact of science that you create the law of attraction, or you know the scientific law of thermodynamics. What you concentrate on when you have a thought, an emotion, it equals creation. So you create your own reality. And what I'm seeing is a gap between the 6th civilization who have not got it and the 7th civilization who have. And there's a big parting. And the most recent pandemic has really amplified and highlighted the gap between those who have fallen for it and those who haven't. So that is what we're seeing. We're seeing realities within realities. So we don't need the whole of humanity for things to change. It may change for you and me, but not for them. But that's for them to sort out, because everybody has the same opportunities. Everybody has, when I'm looking at things now, and when I'm researching things, sometimes I'm finding things in 4 or 5 minutes. So if I can do that, so can everybody else. It's a case of willpower. Do you want to do that? Do you want to know the truth? Do you want to continue doing what you've done for the last 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years? Or do you really want to look at what it's all about? Do you really want to look at what reality is all about? Do you want to know that every time your eyes see something, your eyes see everything upside down, but your brain turns it the right way up? It creates a familiar world. Your 5 senses, which are your 5 winds of Christ, take information from the waves of the universe, pass that to the brain, and the brain interprets it from memory. So what we're seeing as reality is not true. So if we don't see with the 2 eyes, but we look with the spiritual eye, then we will see the true reality. But it is for us to want to do that. Now, you have to want to learn, you have to want to know, you have to want to be an initiate of the ancient temples. People now are finding, me included, that initiations were once in the temples, but in the modern day, they are forming tests and challenges of life, which are initiation tests. How do you deal with them? How do you deal with horrific dreams? Do you believe the dream, or do you realize it's a dream, at which point the dream stops? Do you accept this as an absolute reality, or do you see it as not an absolute reality, which means that the reality stops, your reality changes? So the initiation tests are modern day life, and everybody makes a decision, everybody has a reaction, everybody does what they feel is right, but nevertheless that is still an initiation test of modern day temples. And the real temple is the body.
Yeah, I would say fear also is just the root of all of everything that we do in our lives. It's kind of scary when you think about it. But, we go to work because we're afraid we won't make money and then we'll be homeless or whatever the case. We get married, we have children because sometimes, not all the time. I don't mean to say that's a bad thing, because I think it's wonderful. But, we're afraid that, this is what I'm supposed to do. We stay in jobs we don't like. Kind of, you left yours, but most people wouldn't. They would just, well, this is so, this is steady, and we're in a recession, and why would I do that? I'm going to stay in this. I
mean, fear really is the currency of the control freaks. So if they can keep everyone in fear, then they can control them. Now, even the Bible says, fear the Lord, fear God. However, people do not understand what fear really means. Fear in Hebrew, which is the code of the Bible, fear means to know, to have knowledge of. So it's not telling you to be scared of the Lord or to be scared of God, but he's saying have knowledge of the Lord, have knowledge of God. So anybody who is in fear, if you have knowledge, there is no fear, because you understand what is going on, you understand who is behind it, you understand how they're manipulating reality to make you fit into the accepted reality, the accepted existence. So fear means to know, to understand, to have knowledge of. And if you do have knowledge of, then where's the fear? Where is the fear that I am a fragment of the original creation? I am feeding back information to the creative force that put everything here so that it can learn and understand itself, to recognize itself in the mirror, to feed back information to itself so that nothing can become everything, which is full and complete. Now, when you understand that, where is the fear? Where is the fear? But because we don't understand what's going on, then we fall into the trap of believing the media, of believing what the governments are telling us, that this is happening, that's happening. When you understand it, there really is no fear. It's just a case of raising your awareness, which is really what consciousness is.
Are you religious?
No. I've never been religious, however, from really a conscious self-memory. When I go past the church, an old church, then certainly some of the old beautiful monasteries and that we have in this country, that when I go past anything, it speaks to me. I will look at the architecture, I will look at things, and I will see a language. I recognize that language. So I've never been religious. However, even at the age of 7 and 8, I used to watch famous movies. One of them that I remember was The Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston, where he played the character Moses. And even at the age of 7 and 8, probably even less, I was watching that movie and asking adult questions of myself. How could this happen? Can it happen? How could he have done it? Is Moses real? And this was at the age of 7 and 8. So there's always been a deep fascination with these hidden things, questioning how, why, could it happen? And of course, finding out really that the whole of the Moses story is talking about the exodus of this chakra risen anointed one, going through the different chapters of Jacob's ladder. Because when you go from captivity, which is the root chakra, to the promised land, which is the crown, which is the illumination, in mystical terms, in Gnostic terms, they call that the path of least resistance, but the technical word for that is the open sea. So now when you know that means the open sea, then you can start to see that the parting of the Red Sea in Moses is really talking about the exodus from the lower consciousness to the higher consciousness to the promised land. And the opening of the sea, the open sea, is the path of least resistance for that serpent wisdom, that serpent energy, to take the transit from below to above. And that is really what the Moses story is. So he didn't part the Red Sea. It is a metaphor for an anatomical spiritual process. The burning bush, the fornix, which is the burning bush of the mind, the illumination of the mind, so on and so on. Noah relates to the number 7, the mystic key to the third dimension, which is the completion of the 7 chakras. The rainbow above the arcane knowledge, the knowledge of the few, is the connection of the 7 chakras, and the rainbow are the colours of each of the chakras. So it's all a metaphor for how we rise from a human condition to a human potential. And that is your David and Goliath. Goliath is really the biblical size of Goliath equates to the number 99. The number 99 in numerology equates to increased cognitive awareness, illumination. So that the giants are the spiritual giants that copulated with the daughters of men, so that through the law of heredity, they could come back into the system to reincarnate, to help humanity out of its darkness, out of its ignorance. So what I was saying prior to the show is that some people are here because they chose to be here now. Because for whatever reason, they wanted to come back into this, a body, a different body, to try and help humanity from within, the light within. And that is what has happened. And when the Bible talks about the sons of God copulating with the daughters of men, that is so you can create a line of hereditary, so you can come back as a reincarnation. But when you come back as a reincarnation, you have to start again and develop again, and you have to remember what you already know. So you don't become enlightened, you are already enlightened, you just have to remember.
Now, it's interesting. Another thing, like, as you're talking, I'm thinking when you were a child, you were asking all these questions, and I remember I would do that too. And I find the company of children so much more refreshing than adults because they're so real. Like if a child tells you you're funny, you know that they're mean it. They're not just going to say it to flatter you. If a child, wants your attention, it's because they actually are, drawn to you, they think you're interesting. I'm beginning to wonder, like, we reach our peak when we're born and we're kind of untainted. And then you hear people have near-death experiences, which sounded very similar to what you were talking about when you say kind of like everything just comes together in one, there's no time, there's no, everything, just this overwhelming feeling of fulfillment, no fear, very light. because birth is definitely a kind of a violent sort of thing when you think of you're like pushed out into the world. But it seems like when you're a child, and that's what a lot of control freaks like to target, children, because there's this pureness and wholeness of children. You don't look at yourself, you don't say, oh, do I look fat, you know, do I have enough money, you know, you don't do that kind of stuff. You just kind of, you're happy with yourself, you're happy with the world around you, and you're curious, you're just out in the world. You know, it's so interesting when you see a child and they do something and they realize something else happened because they did it. They want to keep doing that, you know. It's like they get so delighted, like, oh, I made that happen, you know. It's just so curious. And we don't, you know, as we get older, we kind of lose that. It gets kind of worn out of us. So I don't know, there seems to be a real connection between birth and death, and then like all the challenges are in between there.
Well, it's only really a physical death, and nothing is really set to be forever when you talk in terms of matter. So even the universe at some point in the future will cease to exist in its current form. So really, we are, say, borrowed energy from the universe that goes back. When children come into this world, they still see everything as oneness. There is no separation even when they are born. And at some point, society programs them. You know, you go to school and you are basically told this is history, this is how you learn, this is what you are. So up until society manipulates them and remolds them, they see everything as one. There is no separation. There is no fear that they'll be provided for. And really, it's that innocence, that inner child innocence that we do need to go back to. And it's lovely when you see a child develop, and again, but at the point where society takes hold of them, interferes with their brain waves, because at certain parts of developments they will have different brain waves, alpha, beta, delta, gamma, and society programs them and molds them society's way. And it's really when you look at like the Spanish Inquisition and different things, that if people were saying something different to what the scripture was saying, they would be massacred. We do things slightly different in the modern day, whereas we just assassinate people's character and we form them into a mold that society wants through schooling, through parenting. You know, all of these things that they teach us, even though it's false, one thing they do not teach us is how to be a parent, how to understand the subconscious mind of a child is a fertile field. And what I mean by fertile field is that you can plant anything in there. So society and bad parents and bad teachers are continuously planting weeds in the subconscious field of children. Those weeds continue to grow and grow and grow. Now, many of the people that I speak to who have spiritual issues now and don't seem to be able to get any further forward, and they have blockages, and you can trace it back to something that was said in their childhood, pretty much 100% of the time. You know, I want to be a football player when I get older. You'll never be a football player. Do you know how many kids want to be football players? You're never going to be that. I want to be an astronaut. An astronaut, you'll never be an astronaut. You have to be intelligent. You have to go to university. Now, this is planting fields in the subconscious mind of children, instead of saying, you can be anything that you want, which is planting seeds, not weeds. So everything that is happening in a child's life that they take the burden into adult life is largely weeds that have been planted in their subconscious mind. But because we don't understand the difference between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, we allow anything in. Whereas if you have knowledge of a subconscious mind and a fertile field, the conscious mind becomes the guardian of the gate. So you filter these things out and you stop them going in. But because we don't teach that, because we don't understand that, because we don't understand ourselves and how we work and how we can be easily manipulated, and how governments have specific departments that deal with the psychology of the human being, they understand how to work us. If we understand ourselves, we will understand every single mystery there is, but we don't. We're never taught about ourselves. Only the select few people who've been initiated or been brought into chosen to be in receipt of this knowledge know. Even 32-degree Masons don't know, because they are also excluded from the truth. If you bear in mind that there's only 33 known degrees of masonry, even when you get to the 32nd degree, you still don't know. You're still excluded from the truth. That tells you how high up this knowledge goes in order to be kept from the masses. But if you wish the knowledge, if you seek the knowledge, it will come to you, because the universe is a library, and the quantum field stores every single piece of information that has ever existed anywhere. Because you are made of the same particles, the same essence, then you have access to that information. And some people will call that the Akashic record, some people call it the quantum field, quantum physics, whatever you wish to call it. It is a gigantic library of knowledge that we have access to. It is all around us, but we've shut ourselves off. And why? Because we've gone so deep into matter, we can't see the shore anymore. And that needs to be reversed. And we need to have the right people in charge, the right teachers teaching us correctly. Because at the moment, there are too many captains that are steering us wrong. And they are deliberately steering us wrong. And that has to change in order for humanity to go back to the correct timeline, to the correct, we say, game, experiment, however you wish to phrase it. We are here to relay information back to ourselves. And at some point, in computer terms, we will defragment and go back to singularity, which is both nothing and everything in simultaneous existence.
Yeah, and the people who are in charge, so to speak, if they understand these secrets, they're certainly doing the absolute antithesis of like everything that they're about. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's just like, if you understand that we're divine, we're capable of so much more, I don't feel that they're even tapping into that. It's like they understand it, but they're doing everything in their power to go against that, which I don't understand why that would be.
Well, you see what these people really, when you look at, they're also initiates. But again, when you look at ancient Egyptian scrolls and writings, and then you decipher them, what it is saying is those who have reached seventh plane, shall we say, of the divine condition, if you fall from that position, you fall further than the ordinary person who's never even started that journey. So even though you can be an initiate and full of knowledge, you have fallen from a pretty high place. The higher the mountain, the further you have to fall. So what we have is, yes, they have knowledge, but it's not being used for the correct purposes. It's not being used for the greater good of everyone. It's being used for selfish means to gain advantage. But those are the fallen ones. Now, when you look at the Bible and they talk about the fallen angels and different things, they are the fallen initiates who have this knowledge, who once existed in the divine condition, the seventh sphere, but fell for whatever temptation, for whatever reason. Now, there's also an Egyptian story where he talks about these elongated skulls, sons of gods, realizing this was happening because when you can control consciousness, you can go in the past and go into the future. And I've experienced, as I've already said, going into the past, and I've experienced visitations from Egypt that have come into my timeline, into my future. So I've experienced conscious time travel either way. Now, when you can control consciousness, when you can go beyond time and space, you can see either side of the timeline. And if you want to see the future, then you see cause and effect at the same moment. That is the future. They realized what was going to happen and how the world was going to almost have a change of rulership. And they took 2 boats and they put lots and lots of possessions, their family, domesticated animals, their instruments of power, and they sailed to different parts of the earth. Now that explains why you have elongated skulls in Peru, in Malta, Stonehenge, South America's, Russia, all of these different places, because they traveled there and they took their secrets there. So everywhere that you see a pyramid or a sacred site, that is where they went. And it also describes how these sons of men who were using these divine powers for incorrect means, how they bought lots and lots of devastation and destruction to the earth from Earth's atmosphere. And it also describes what seemed to be an endless current of rain upon the earth. Now, it doesn't take too much of the imagination to say, actually, we've got Noah's Ark story coming here. We have people in ships taking animals and their family, torrential rain, endless torrential rain, and devastation on the earth. That, to me, is the story of Noah's Ark. Now, when you read the Dead Sea Scrolls, it tells you that Noah's Ark is the Great Pyramid, sealed capsule of knowledge, because an ark is really the electrical arc of the body. Now, that electrical arc of the body rolls away the stone of the tomb, the archangel, the archangel that rolls away the tomb, the stone of the tomb of Christ. So when you look at ancient stories, and then you say, actually, I've read that in the Bible, so there is some truth to it, but it's been changed. And these fallen angels, these people who once held locked position of divine light, fell, but in doing so, they fell lower than the average person who never even started the journey of initiation. And those are the people now who we have ruling us, the ones who are power crazy, control freak crazy. They must have all the resources. They must run Earth as a prison and must run Earth as a profit. You know, my company must be better than yours. It is competition. Everything in this life is competition. You have 1% of people that own 94% of Earth's resources. And the rest of us are fighting and arguing over the 7% that is left. But these are the people who we are allowing to rule us. These are the pathological liars from whom we expect truth. You don't get truth from pathological liars, you get lies and deception. And that is what is ruling us. And the more and more you realize your history, you are not doomed to repeat history. And that repeat of history goes back to the cycle.
Yeah, I mean, that's, and as you're just saying all this, I'm like, wow, do people like J.K. Rowling or Tolkien, you know, do they know all? Because it's so, I mean, it just fits perfectly into that storyline, you know, that esoteric, you know, oh, the wizarding world of Harry Potter, but it's just, you know, it's so, it's
all
so
true.
like good and evil, and the character of
It's all true.
Voldemort, and you know, he's so wise. He's such a powerful wizard. He understands all these things and these secrets, and you know, but he uses it for such evil purposes. And then you have this, it's always the little ones. That's why I say to people, I use a pyramid example a lot, but when people say, well, what can we do? They have all the power. I always say, well, look at a pyramid. If we're at the bottom and they're at the top, if you take the bottom out, what happens at the top? It just crumbles. That's the way it is. And, you know, you have, you know, people like, you know, Harry Potter or the Hobbits. It's like, who would think these people would be the heroes to save the day? Harry Potter lived, what, under the staircase? No parents, no nothing, you know, just some unassuming, nerdy little kid with no self-confidence. And then you have someone like Frodo, who's just, you know, hanging out in the Shire doing his thing, and you know, okay, well, now you're going to save the world. You know, you're going to take on the most evil person and you're going to save the world, and they do. And so I just feel like, you know, these people, they must be somehow into these societies, because
no, they are. And a lot of things that they put into their films and their movies, again, is the secret wisdoms, is the secret true reality. Now, magic, really, but when you impose your will upon others, that is black magic. So we live in a world of black magic, really, where everyone else's will is imposed upon us. Government will, society's will is imposed upon us. So that is really black magic. But there is a lot of ancient magic. When all the gods that we worship, you'll find that the majority of them can be condensed into 4 letters, into tetragrammaton, and they are really magic formulas. So when you are saying these tetragrammatons, these god names in certain ways with a certain tone of voice, you are evoking energies, certain energies. And when you look at some of the black magic of some of these secret society rituals, through the power of a collective mind, i.e. all the people who are there, they are able to create entities in the astral realm they are then able to communicate with. The problem that we have, there's so many people doing these things that don't understand what they're doing, is that they're leaving open doorways for these entities to live amongst us, unseen, unmanifest. And they are feeding off us, they are feeding off our lower negative entity. It is their food. So if you imagine that, you have all of these parasites in an energetic form that you can't see, and their food is negative energy of fear, then we have a creation that is a buffet table for them. Because there's so many doorways where these are now coming through. And the amount of new age people that I see going to sacred sites, I'm going to go and cleanse the land today. I'm going to go and open doorways and cleanse the land. But they haven't got a clue what they're doing. So what they're doing is they're actually making it worse because they're leaving doorways for negative entities to come in. So they're not cleansing the land, they're causing a problem for the land because they have no knowledge of what they're doing. They're just being told is correct because someone else who don't know what they're doing gives them a certificate to say that they do. And you have this egotistical system of spiritual people who don't understand the way things work. And if you don't understand how things work, if you don't have self-control, then stay clear of what you don't know. And so we have, a society now really where we have a sort of an undercurrent of negativity that is ruling. And each religion of the past, each ancient people of the past have specified that by different names. If you speak to a Muslim and you talk about the negative influence on humankind, you'll say that's the jinn. If you speak to a Christian, say that's a demon. Except and genies and different things, the jinn and genies, but each culture has had a different name for the same negative underlying force that has ruled humanity by a different name, but nevertheless they've all described it as a negative force. And that's what we're still living under because we don't understand our potential, we don't understand what is happening, we don't understand how to reverse it. Because people who are in positions to tell you how are the ones controlling you. So they're not going to tell you how.
Of course.
Why is so many different books of the Bible taken out of the Bible? Because the books that were taken out by the Council of Nicaea tell people their sovereignty, tell people their power. Now, if you wish to control them, you don't want them to know that. So what do? You edit it. You edited the book so they'd never get to read it. Now, everybody wishes to control everybody else. And that is a system of black magic. And until humanity spends time to work out who he and she are, when they know who they are, then things change. And there's so much effort put in to stop people knowing and realizing who they are. It is a 24/7 operation for the control freaks that want to stop you from knowing who you are. They've created a whole system of history, which is false. They've created a whole system of what human is, which is false. They've created a whole system of religion that is not teaching you the truth in order to stop you from knowing the truth. That takes a lot of effort to do. So there must be a lot at stake for them. But it really is, a lot of them are the fallen ones or descendants of the fallen ones who fell from great height because of the lust for power, the lust for control, because they want to have everything to themselves, even knowledge. Knowledge is power. They don't want you to know what they know because it gives them the advantage over you. And once we realize what we're up against, then we can begin to make the changes we need to make.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand and I agree with you 100%, but it's so funny because we'll believe it in storytelling. Joseph Campbell, what didn't he say? The hero's journey, the arc. And it's just like, well, we'll believe it. Like, we'll believe that Harry Potter can defeat Voldemort, who it seems that's impossible. We'll believe that David defeated Goliath. We'll believe that Frodo can defeat Sauron or whatever. you know, but we can't believe that we could do that. And it's funny because it's all out there, you know, because I mean, in America anyway, we love storytelling, we love movies, we love to be brought into that fantasy. And it's like, but I feel like we're being told constantly, you have the power, you know, the tiniest little last person on the planet, like, you know, they look at, and I know I keep talking about this, but it's just so funny because like you look at Lord of the Rings, all these big guys with armor and swords, and you know, they're so like, ooh, I would fear that person. Oh, and they're really good people, but yet they weren't the ones chosen. It's like, no, you can't defeat this really, really scary, really, really violent, evil thing. You with the big hairy feet that don't know how to wield a weapon, have no idea how to do anything. You're the one who's going to do it. So I wish we could shift that and say like, well, I think it's out there. I feel like there are messages out there, whether intended or not. They're always out there that, you know, we can do this. We just have to get back to who we are, because those people, those little people, little seemingly little people know who they are. They know like, hey, you know, I have friends, I have family, I'm rooted, I have love, you know, and yet we're just like, yeah, but that's fiction. I'm like, we can't, that's not real. Yeah.
The only power that the rulers have is the power that we give them. They have no self-sustaining power. We believe that they have power when they don't. So when you look at movies and different things, there are so many messages ingrained within so-called fictional movies, within so-called fictional stories. I mean, the Christ story was known as the greatest story ever told. Now, the clue is in the sentence, the greatest story ever told, because it's a story. But you can hide things within stories. Now, the whole reason that Dan Brown and the Da Vinci Code, he wrote that as fiction, because he knew he'd have less resistance as fiction. Oh, it's only a story. Whereas if he said it was non-fiction, then all of a sudden you have the church on your back and everybody else. So he got truth, although I don't agree with all of his conclusions, but nevertheless, he got truth on the back end of the fiction. And the Bible is truth on the back end of the fiction. If you look deep enough to find the submarine that I spoke about at the beginning, it is all there. You know, when you look at like the tree, which stands for truth, when you look at the only part of the tree that you can't see are the roots. The roots are symbolic of hidden secret knowledge. When you look at the word blaspheme or blasphemer, it means to uproot. So if you are a blasphemer, all you're doing is uprooting unseen knowledge into the public domain. That is a blasphemer. But because there is a negative connotation, if someone calls you a blasphemer, all of a sudden everybody sees that as a negative thing. It's not. You just don't understand what the word means. So when you look at tree, true, when you look at the word druid, which is basically oak knowledge or the knower of the oak tree, the druids used to use the wood from the holly tree for their magic. That is the magic of Hollywood. It is all there if you wish to see it, but it is written in a fictional story in many cases. Hollywood tells you what has happened, what it is happening, and what is going to happen. If you can decipher what these producers are telling you, when you look at the likes of Spielberg and Lucas, they have knowledge. You know, a lot of Spielberg's 1980s films were about ETs, extraterrestrials. What are extraterrestrials really? Advanced spiritual humans who have come back to help their brothers and sisters. That's it. Their soul journey and experience has transcended this, and they now operate and continue that journey in different star systems because they are genetically and blood connected to us. They come back to help us from an advanced spiritual human perspective. We had an incident in the 80s at an American Air Force base in England, the Rendlesham Forest incident. It is documented that one of the Air Force high rank said to them, to the ETs, "Who are you?" And the reply was, "We are you in the future." They are advanced spiritual humans who have come back to help. That is why when people say to me, "Well, what are they here for? Why is there so many sightings now? Why is there more and more sightings now?" Because we are ready for them. and they are coming back to help. You know, not all of them, because as I say, when you have the universe in the way in which it's created, you can't have one without the other. You have to have a simultaneous existence. One you can see, one you cannot. This at the moment is life manifest, but unmanifest in a simultaneous existence is death. So when they take place, they swap places, death becomes the manifest and life becomes the unmanifest in the spiritual realms. And then when it swaps places again, that is reincarnation. So you always have a manifest and an unmanifest in simultaneous existence. That is the only way that you can have existence in this way. They are here, not all of them, some of them are negative ones, but a lot of them are here to help us. And what I will say is, if the government ever disclose, don't take it at face value. Again, you can't expect truth from pathological liars. If the government announces disclosure, there is a reason, an underlying theme beyond that. So look deeper into disclosure for any government. I don't need a government, I don't need an official channel to tell me what I already know exists.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Is there, I mean, that's pretty much, I think we've kind of, you know, closed the loop
Circle.
there on the conversation, and this is wonderful. Is there anything else that you wanted to share before I ask you where people can find you? And obviously in the intro, I kind of said what you have coming up in the future, but I want to share again.
Again, what I always like to share at the end is to try and make people aware of who they are and what their potential is. For far too long, people are being told what they're not instead of what they are. And the not is false. The not is telling them that they are flesh and blood. They are born kicking and screaming into a world. They work, the whole of their life is work to pay taxes when the complete monetary system is a fraud. But nevertheless, you work, you pay taxes, you retire, you die. And that really, for many, because they are told, is an absolute reality. They only identify with physicality. They can never identify beyond that because they're never told that there is a beyond that. So the reason I do these things really is to get people to realize who they are and what their potential is. We are so much more than flesh and blood. We are so much more than matter. We are matter with a human consciousness, but we are much more. So that is really what I would always like to translate to people, that you are the God divine condition manifest as matter with the consciousness of a human. You are unlimited potential. There is nothing to fear. Don't take anything face value. Question everything regardless of who it is that is telling you.
Beautiful. Thank you. And I hope more people start to, I think they are, you're absolutely right. And I hope more and more keep doing that as well, because we definitely want to break this loop, this cycle. I think we're capable of so much more. So where can people find you? And I'll post the links as well when I post this. But where can people find you? What should they be looking for? You know, you said you're having a show coming up. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the best place to find me is basically the central foundation, which is the website, which is michael-feeley.com, Feeley. From there, you can find me on YouTube, social media, all the events that are coming up. When I did a show, a documentary for that channel that you saw the film, and then I was invited to do the film Divine Intervention. And as a result of that, I was then invited to do my own weekly TV show, which will discuss these things. So that is something that is coming up soon, just sort of going through the logistics really on how we're going to do that. What people can find on the website really is what we're saying now. You can read blogs, you can join newsletters, you can have one-on-one talks with me. All of these things, there are many free blogs and everything on there that will answer some of the questions that you have. I'm also now just writing a book called Who Built the Pyramids, where once and for all, I'm going to tell you who built them and how. One of the questions I missed earlier on is how did they do it? I'll let you into a little clue. They did not use slaves. They used the forces of nature to assist them. So they had technology which has been found in expeditions within the Great Pyramid that were able to make the forces of nature work for them. So it wasn't built by slaves, it was built by machines that were able to manipulate the forces of nature, and this included anti-gravity machines. So when you see large stones that are lifted, that was being lifted by anti-gravity technology. That is how they were able to put these stones into place. So it's going to go really, really into depth into who built them, how and why, and a lot of the messages that are found in there. I did a mathematical formula recently of the speed of reality. And what I noticed later, but not at the time, that there was this extremely long sequence of numbers that was in my mathematical formula of the speed of reality, which I've also found is within the sound harmonics of the Great Pyramid. So there's a lot of mathematics, there's a lot of astronomical and natural law that went in to the pyramids and Stonehenge and different things, but nevertheless it was using matter to manifest divinity on earth. And the Sphinx of Egypt represents the sons of God, who were the elongated skulls, who had the fully developed brain center, who then had greater spiritual ability. They were the spiritual giants that are spoken about, the giants of the Bible, and the likes of the Anunnaki scrolls, where you see giants on the scrolls of Sumeria. This is where it's going to go into deep with the evidence for that and the mathematics for that. So that's what's coming. And as I say, there's a lot of information that is not out there because people don't know what I'm about to say. And it will once and for all solve the mysteries.
Well, we need that. So thank you. I'm looking forward to that. And you can get your books on Amazon and on your website. You
can just in the normal places, really. So all the other books really have been, I think been building up for this one. So I'm looking forward to that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time, Michael, and hopefully we can chat again. I'd love that. Once you get some more stuff out, maybe we can talk about that. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and anytime. Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much.